Hi, I'm Cohesive, and welcome to the Cohesive Channel.
Welcome back to Gameplay Disclosure. This is the series where I take randomly selected rated levels and discuss what's wrong with their gameplay, using the 10 aspects of bad gameplay. It's the first Gameplay Disclosure on the Cohesive Channel voiced by me, so if you're confused on what the aspects are, check out the first Gameplay Disclosure on the Alterativity Channel for a more detailed explanation. Last time, Alt covered the level Minimix by Danger Cat, which is primarily boring in nature. Today I'm going to be disclosing one of the 1.9 levels made for Darnock's Creator Contest, that being AfterHexagon by Softable. So without further ado, let's disclose the 9th level for Gameplay Disclosure. The first section is quite an interesting way to start off the level, but certainly not perfect. First off, this slope here requires the cube to jump, which isn't very obvious and therefore could be considered to be a bit confusing. Another problem is that this pink jump orb inside of the ball portal is quite blind for the player. Even though it could still be sight read in specific situations, it still counts as blind gameplay. It's about everything wrong with the first section, so not much else needs to be said here. Section 2 is quite similar to the previous section in terms of the issues that are present in it. The first issue comes from this slope, where the ball is supposed to avoid this fading spike to get to the next part. However, most players wouldn't be able to understand that within the time they are given, which makes it rather confusing. The next problem presents itself at this cube, with the first blue orb that the cube has to hit being off-screen, making it a blind jump orb. Lastly, this cube part can confuse some players due to how the block structures are set up, but because this part isn't lethal, it isn't that confusing either. This section's a lot weirder than the previous two. The first problem here is this dual portal. This turns the ship into a duel, which most of the time happens to be misaligned. This causes the transition to be quite awkward and confusing for the player. Once you get to the end of this UFO part, transitioning to the cube can lead to the cube not landing on the platform next to it. Therefore, the UFO has to be a little higher up. This isn't apparent to the player, making it a bit of an awkward timing. Next up, this ball part requires you to go through the upside down portal immediately as you land on the platform. Again, this is quite awkward as there isn't enough time to realize this. Lastly, this cube requires you to jump over some fading spikes around the slopes, which is quite confusing due to it being off screen at first. It isn't blind though, as there is time to react to it, but it can certainly throw players off. This section primarily has issues with awkward gameplay, and also has some confusing bits in it as well. To begin, this mirror portal transition creates the illusion that the player might need to jump over the jump pad. This can be considered confusing, but doesn't always end up killing the player. The ship that follows this transition is quite awkward because of how low the cube is at the time of entering the ship portal. This can be quite annoying at times. Following this is the UFO. The portals are placed in some peculiar spots here, and can be considered awkward to some extent. The last issue in this section is this dual transition, and it's definitely the worst part of this section, maybe even the entire level. If the wave isn't completely in the middle of this dual portal, which is quite hard to do, the wave ends up hitting the blocks above and below the portal, making this transition very awkward and inconsistent. So overall, this section is one of the worst ones in the entire level and has a lot of big issues present in it. This next section is just weird. First off, this ship transition can throw some people off, as it's not completely obvious that this ship is a duel at the time of the transition. However, it can still easily be read, so the extent of it being confusing is at a lower level. Next up, this wave transition is very awkward to do as the mirror portal obstructs your vision temporarily. The wave itself is also kind of confusing to get by. Next to this, the jump orb inside of this cube portal is very awkward to hit because of the wave not being in the same place in the portal all the time. Lastly, this yellow jump orb is quite awkward to hit. That's because the timing required, that being a late timing, isn't made clear to the player. This causes the timing to become quite awkward. This last section features a lot of smaller issues compared to the previous sections. The first issue is in this cube transition. Because there's a mirror portal used for this transition, it's hard to tell where the platform you're landing on and the jump orb are going to be, making it somewhat blind. The cube itself can also be a bit confusing due to how the timings are set up. The next issue is this transition into the mini wave. As you may be able to tell, it's very hard to know that there's an obstacle about to appear off screen after the wave transition, making it quite blind. The transition from this mini wave into the ship part is also a little awkward because of how the mini wave can end up in different areas of the ship portal. Other than those issues, there's not much else to say here. After disclosing AfterHexagon's gameplay, I've come to the following conclusions. First off, the majority of the issues in this level come from awkward gameplay. Some timings don't feel right in the level and can be considered unfair by the player. Playtesting the level more lowers the chance of this occurring. Another problem here comes from the blind gameplay. A lot of the transitions in this level come out of nowhere and are hard to predict for the player, if at all. This is especially the case for the mirror portals, as this lowers the time players have to react to the transitions. Lastly, some parts in the level feel a bit confusing. It's sometimes hard to tell where you're supposed to be in some of the sections, making it quite annoying to read at times. I hope you all enjoyed this part of the gameplay disclosure. As usual, don't harass softable or any of the things mentioned in this video, as these points only indicate issues in already existing levels and are made purely to teach anyone how to make their own gameplay better. I mean, you shouldn't harass anyone either way, but that should go without saying. This is the first gameplay disclosure put onto this channel. It's also the first gameplay disclosure voiced by me, so it might seem quite different from the previous entries. If you have any suggestions for rated levels I could do for future gameplay disclosure, feel free to let me know in the comments. Any new suggestions will be placed onto a Word document so I or Alt can get around to it eventually. And of course, any tips on how to improve this series would be great to hear from you there as well. Alright, this is Versatile signing off. Goodbye.
Hi, it's me again. I want to thank Versatile again for voicing this whole thing because, I mean, it's a huge job to do. The script was a lot longer than I expected it to be, and I wouldn't have made this video at all for probably another few months if he didn't actually do this for me. So I really want to thank him for that. check him out if you haven't. I'll link his YouTube channel in the description, so check him out. I also asked him if I was allowed to put any of his mishaps during the whole voiceover thing, and he said yes. So to end off this video, here's a full-on blooper moment of Versatile, I guess. I don't know why I thought this was a good idea, but I'm stupid. So yeah. Have a good day, guys.
Section 2 is quite similar to... okay, take 2. Where the ball is supposed to avoid this fading spike... Lastly... Okay, let's try this again. This section's a lot weirder than the previous 2. The first problem here is this dual portal. This turns the ship into a dual, which is often out of sync with each other. This causes the transition to be quite awkward and confusing for the player. No, let's try that again. There might be some background noise, by the way. I'm just recording this in my living room with a blanket over myself. Fuck. What am I saying?